Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Nessie's Dead. As always, we are your hosts, Spencer and Helen.
Hello.
Hello. You've been sick.
I know. I've been sick for about a week now. I'm just now starting to feel better. I got my voice back, which is nice. So here we are.
Yeah, I think you need a voice to do a podcast.
Yeah, I think that's
It makes
pretty
a
crucial.
difference.
It does. It definitely does.
But thankfully, we have our voices, and we have something to talk about tonight.
Do we now?
Me specifically, because I'm
Yes.
hosting.
Again,
Yes.
because I've been sick.
Yes, applause.
So we get an extra episode of Spencer this week.
Yeah, lucky you guys.
Right?
So shall we go ahead and plunge into this one?
Yes, let's plunge. What do you have for me tonight?
So I'm not going to tell you quite yet,
Oh, okay.
but for this episode, we are going to be going to Pascagoula, Mississippi. Are you familiar with that town at all?
Yeah, absolutely not.
I was praying you didn't know.
Absolutely not.
So it is it was kind of small at the time that the story takes place initially. It's not really so much of a small town now. It's a population of about, I think, 21,000. But it is a coastal town at the southeastern tip of Mississippi. Fun fact, Jimmy Buffett is actually from this town.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Another fun fact is that in 1973, two men were supposedly abducted by aliens. Can you guess which fun fact we're going to talk about?
I'm going to say aliens.
So this is the Pascagoula UFO Incident.
I don't think I know this. We'll see as you get into this and you start
Yeah,
talking.
it might jog your memory through
Maybe.
the story. So, of course, this town of Pascagoula, it was very quiet. Nothing really ever happened. And that is until October of 1973. Two men, we have 42-year-old Charles Hickson and 19-year-old Calvin Parker. Charles worked as a ship fitter on the Pascagoula River. It involves building and working on ships.
Gotcha.
For anyone who doesn't know.
I had no clue what that was.
I didn't know either.
I was hoping you would explain.
Yeah. So his friend Kelvin, the 19-year-old, reaches out to him about getting a job as a ship fitter on the river. And he begins working with Charles on October 11th, 1973. Now, at the end of his first day, the two men decide to go down to the river and spend the rest of the evening fishing. They find a spot and they set up on a pier. And at this point, the sun is going down. It was like 5 p.m. And a few hours go by. They're just hanging out, fishing, enjoying their time. By about 8 p.m., Kelvin starts to hear what he describes as a zipping sound. He then notices behind him these two flashing blue lights that initially he thought were police headlights. They stand up and they're watching as this light is just getting closer and getting bigger and brighter. So bright that it's essentially blinding them. However, they are able to make out these figures that emerge from the light.
Like shadows?
Not quite. So the men describe them as humanoid figures with very robotic kind of movements. They were about 5 feet tall. They had no neck. Their head just sat right on top of their shoulders. They had claw-like pincher kind of hands, like a crab. And they had these tiny little slits for their mouth, no eyes. But where their nose and ears would be, they had these long protruding spikes.
Terrifying.
Yeah. They also noted that they were gray in color and they were, it looked as if they had a wrinkly big suit on. They said they couldn't quite tell if that was the skin, like this loose, wrinkly skin, or if they were wearing strange head to toe bodysuits.
That is the most bizarre description I have ever heard of an alien, ever.
Yeah,
I thought the last one you did with the Flatwoods was
Flatwoods.
pretty bizarre, but this one,
Hmm.
this takes the cake here.
Yeah, this one's a alien fashion show.
It definitely sounds like it.
And it only gets weirder from here. So the men are staring, they're watching, they're not sure what is going on. They're a little bit freaked out, they're really confused, but they note that they're not able to move. They were kind of paralyzed and just frozen in their space. But they were completely aware of everything that was going on.
But not frozen out of fear, just legitimately like
Yeah,
frozen.
like they couldn't. I think at first they thought that they were frozen out of fear, but
Mm.
they described it as they just physically couldn't move. And that kind of frozen in time phenomenon, we will talk about a little bit later on with some other witnesses, actually.
Okay, that's terrifying too.
Yeah. So Kelvin notes that he was poked and injected with something. He said that once he was injected with it, he started to feel a sense of calm. I think they injected him with some kind of calming serum or some kind of just light tranquilizer.
That's what I was thinking, like a tranquilizer.
And the creatures or figures or whatever, they grab the two men and they begin levitating them up over the water. And Calvin said he remembers looking up and notices that they're like levitating into this big floating craft above him, a spaceship, if you will.
Yeah.
And he said that it was round and very, very shiny, and it looked as if it was glowing itself. He did not see any lights on it, but it was almost as if this thing illuminated light on its own, or as if it was very reflective, like an aluminum almost. So once they're inside of this craft, the men are led through several doors and taken into rooms. Now they're separated. They're each in their own little room. So Charles described his experience as he was laying down, but he said he wasn't laying on anything. It was as if he was just suspended in the air, also levitating essentially.
Just free floating.
Yes. He explained that these creatures were telepathically communicating with him, but they weren't necessarily giving him any information or saying anything, but they were probing his mind and going into all of his thoughts and memories and kind of like dissecting him psychologically, telepathically.
It's a good way to do some research on the human race, though.
It is. It is. He also said that these beings continue to move very robotically. And at one point, he said that this round device appeared before him and it circled around him. And he thinks that it was actually scanning his body or his brain or something.
They're really getting in there on this guy.
Yeah, they're like really going in on it, but nothing physical. For him, it was all essentially mental or that device that was seemingly scanning him. Meanwhile, Kelvin was in the other room, and his experience was a little scarier. He described his experience as being laid down on some kind of glass table. One of those figures enter the room, and he said intuitively he could just tell that this one was female. She looked like the rest, but he just knew that this one was female for whatever reason. She was also telepathically communicating with him, and she was reassuring him that they were not trying to hurt him, that he was safe with her. However, he did not feel very safe with her. She was kind of poking at his body, applying pressure throughout. And then, now this part's crazy. She took her hand and two of her middle fingers extended and she used them to probe his throat. She grabs his cheek, pulls his jaw down, and sticks her now elongated fingers into his throat and then up his nasal cavity and then extracted something.
I would die.
Yeah, I can't imagine. And I can't even imagine what he's thinking or feeling. I mean, you're literally 1 second just fishing, hanging out, and then next thing you know, you're getting probed in the throat with elongated alien fingers.
No. This sounds like something right out of a sci-fi.
I know. Well, of course, there are skeptics. I will, of course, get into all of that. I don't know where I stand on it.
Oh.
But That will be a big part of the story for sure.
Okay. We all know where I already stand on this.
You believe it. Yeah.
I'm sold.
I know you are. So both men described within their experiences that while they were being operated on and experimented on, some of those figures, those robotic moving figures, were standing by and watching, whereas other ones were kind of doing little tasks throughout the rooms. But they both said that the craft made some kind of buzzing noise and that they could feel as they said that they could feel that the craft was alive itself. So it wasn't so much like they were in the spaceship, they were inside of a biological entity.
Like the vibrations of it?
They said it was like intuitive. They could just tell that it was also alive and also watching them.
I wonder how they would get that feeling though.
I don't know. I feel like maybe when you're experiencing something alien or intergalactic or even paranormal, whatever you want to classify it as, maybe you're able to tune into their frequencies a little easier.
It makes sense, especially if they're already kind of in their brains at this point, or at least in the one guy's brain.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they're both being telepathically communicated with, just in very different ways.
Very different ways.
They also noted that there were these projections, like holograms, that featured what they thought were some type of hieroglyphic.
Did they say what they were able to see on these holograms?
No,
or
I don't think they could really understand it or make out what it was. But I do think that's interesting to note because we've seen that in a lot of alien stories and like the connections with all sorts of different ancient civilizations and their hieroglyphics. And some people who have seen some supposed alien crafts have noted that along the side of it are what appear to be hieroglyphics as well.
But it's just not something that you a recognizable symbol that you can say.
Yeah, I don't
what
think
it was.
I don't think we can understand it. So seemingly as quick as all of this occurred and just happened out of nowhere, suddenly the men are being placed back down on Earth. Now, Charles fell right to his knees immediately. He just like collapsed and fell to the ground. Kelvin, on the other hand, just stood there, I think kind of at this point, paralyzed with fear. I think he was in like an extreme state of shock.
Were they just telepathically like brought back down, or did the aliens float them back down? Did they remember how they
I believe
down?
They were floated back down. They described it as they're suddenly put back on the ground, and then these creatures just kind of go back within the craft, and then in the blink of an eye, everything is gone and back to normal.
It's as if it was all a dream.
As if it was all a dream, exactly.
Ugh.
So the two men are just back on land, terrified, not sure of what to make of what just happened. Charles looks at Kelvin and he says, "You okay, son?" And Kelvin does not initially reply. Charles asks again, and Kelvin then replies with, "Nothing happened."
Wow. How's he gonna just not talk about this?
That's the exact approach he had too. He wanted nothing to do with it. He did not want to talk about it. Charles was like, "What just happened? That's crazy. Oh my God." Kelvin is like, "No, nothing happened. Stop." No, like he really wanted to push this away.
I wonder if more happened to him than he ever like vocalized.
Oh, maybe. Now, they decide to head back home, so they make their way back to the truck. Upon getting to the truck, they notice that the truck's windows had been shattered. And interesting to note, it's a new truck. He had just bought it. I don't think it was Charles's truck. He had just bought it, and I don't think he had even had it for a year at this point, but the engine wasn't working. Like they could not get the car to start. It took a while. They eventually got it to start, but it just kept dying on them, which is something we have seen in other alien stories as well, of cars or other kind of electronics not working.
Yeah, like the electromagnetics and things from the craft mess it up. But I wonder why the windows were busted. Maybe the frequencies that the ship was giving off was just too intense.
Yeah, that's my best guess.
It's very strange to me that they're just like, all right, let's just go home.
Yeah.
Hop in the truck. Nothing
Well,
to
it
see
makes
here.
that was literally how Kelvin was. It was very like, let's go. Let's not address this. And I think Charles kept trying to talk about it, be like, oh my God, like what, this is crazy. We got to tell someone. And Kelvin's like, no, we do not. However, Charles does not keep quiet for long because on the drive back home, they stop at a gas station and Charles gets out and starts using the payphone. Kelvin's kind of in and out. He's not totally present at this moment, so I don't think he was necessarily paying attention to the fact that Charles was getting on the phone. Charles actually calls a nearby military base to report this incident, which makes sense. Like, that's who I would think to call. Well, I would call you first, but
Yeah, you better
after
call me
that, I would
first.
notify the military.
I would be like, hold on, let me record this so we have the full session here.
Yeah, I would just record it and put it on the pod.
We're like, here we go. We don't even
Yeah.
have to record an episode next week. Good for us.
Yeah, mid-alien abduction, I'd be like, hold on.
Hold on.
Can I record you?
I need to take some notes here.
Yeah. But Charles tells whoever answers the phone and whoever he's talking to at this local base about their experience. And they were like, oh, well, you need to call the sheriff instead because we don't handle UFOs anymore. We don't investigate that as of 1969.
And the sheriff does.
Exactly. Yeah, the local police are going to be like, "Oh, we got this. We have it. We know what to do with with aliens," which is also not even necessarily true because the military, they do investigate that.
Yeah, to me, that's like one of the main things the military would be
what else are they
investigating,
doing?
right?
Maybe at that time they weren't investigating it, or maybe that's just what they told civilians.
Or maybe they thought he was crazy and they didn't want to invest any time into it. They're like, just call the sheriff, dude. He'll take care of you. He'll figure it out.
Mm-hmm. So Charles gets back in the truck and they're just kind of sitting there for a moment, and it does not take long for the police to get there. They're questioning them and, shining their lights and everything. They're probably at first assuming that these men are drunk or something, that something's going on that's not aliens.
Yeah, or drugs or something.
Yeah.
And they're not of right mind. I wonder if Calvin's still sitting there kind of out of it as well. It's probably not helping their case.
Probably. They're probably like, this younger guy's acting like a lunatic.
Yeah.
And this other one, the older one, won't shut up. So
drugs.
They take them in for questioning, and they do separate them. Charles is just going on and on and on about every little detail he can get into. He's telling them everything that happened, the sounds and the textures and the colors, everything. Meanwhile, in the room Calvin's in, he just keeps saying, no, nothing happened. Like, we're fine, officer. I just want to go. Like, nothing happened.
Oh, man, he's not even backing up his buddy.
I know. Well, not at first.
Okay.
The police are like, okay, something's going on. These guys are crazy or they're up to something, but their stories are like, not only are they not lining up, they're drastically different, but they could tell that both of the men were really freaked out about something. And they could tell they were like, okay, someone's lying here. Something's going on. So the police decide to put the two men alone in a room, and they were like, okay, you guys just wait here. We'll be right back. Little did Kelvin and Charles know that the police had actually put a secret recorder in that room, and they recorded that whole conversation, which is now known as the secret tape. On that recording, they were able to hear the men talking about this experience. Like, what are we going to do? This is crazy. I don't want to go through with this experience again, blah, blah, blah. And the police were like, okay, now this guy is talking about aliens. Because remember, Kelvin was saying, no, nothing happened. And
Calvin just wanted to go home and take a bath. He was over this.
Yeah, but on that secret recording, he was agreeing with everything Charles said. So the police start to think that the guys are telling the truth, and they actually both end up passing multiple lie detector tests, which, okay, whatever.
Yeah, I'll give them this one. We'll say the lie detectors work this time
Yeah.
because it's aliens. Not in true
Yeah.
crime. They don't count
Yeah,
in true
exactly.
crime, but for alien abductions, lie detector tests, those are accurate,
Yes, you heard it here first.
right?
Interestingly enough, there were actually 50 or so people from that night reporting a similar blue light or some kind of UFO in the sky in that same area.
Oh, so at least they have some witnesses to back up that they weren't the only one that saw the
Yes.
crazy blue light in the
Yeah.
sky.
Now, a lot of them did not come forward at first. There are some pretty interesting accounts. One of them being from a woman named Maria Blair. So her and her husband were down by the river in their car, the Pascagoula River, the same one that the men were just abducted from. Maria notices a blue light in the sky. And at first she was like, oh, that's an airplane with a really weird blue light. But the light starts flickering and growing brighter and brighter. And then she's like, okay, what is going on? This is kind of crazy. Then after the light gets closer to her, she's able to see what she notes as a blurry humanoid figure hovering over the water with no neck.
You think they were just down there looking for somebody? Just whoever they come along, they would take them, and it just happened to be these two guys that they found?
Oh, perhaps, yeah.
Sounds like they were searching.
Yeah, I think so. And then there was also 19-year-old Susan Snow. She was outside walking her dog when suddenly she saw a bright light with multicolor lights spinning around it. She notes that it was predominantly, I think, orange. There was some blue. Now, Calvin and Charles and Maria, they described the light as blue, whereas Susan is describing it, orange and multicolored. I don't know what that's about.
Maybe the ship can just change colors. It could have been an
Well,
indicator that maybe once they had the two guys in there, the ship went into a different mode or something.
oh, maybe. Like it became more
Mm-hmm.
tangible, maybe, and that's when it becomes a different
Multi.
color.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if they can traverse space and time, they can change whatever color they want.
Yeah, they can have whatever lights they choose.
Yeah. So when Susan saw it, she just stood still for like 15 minutes, and her dog that was outside with her also just stood still. They were like frozen in time.
Oh, maybe they stopped time.
I think so. I think that makes the most sense. I don't
Yeah.
think that they're I don't think that aliens are necessarily physically traversing outer space, because that would be essentially physically impossible. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that they are able to bend some kind of energy to where they essentially would be time traveling.
Yeah, because if they're traveling from certain areas of space, that takes millions of years, thousands of years.
Yeah.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
No, maybe aliens
Mm-mm.
do.
Well, if you're able to, of course, bend time, then you have all
Hmm.
the time.
Yes.
Which makes sense to why they've been around since cave people to Egyptians.
Uh-huh.
Just,
Exactly. So Susan, what after the craft disappears or the light disappears, she is no longer frozen. Her dog is no longer frozen. And she runs inside and tells her parents what just happened. And they were like, okay, honey, don't share this with anyone else, okay?
okay, crazy. You go lay
Yeah.
down. You go take a nap now.
Yeah. But the next day, she actually saw the abduction story on the news, which then confirmed her experience as well for her. So then we have one more witness, and one more that I'm going to talk about, and that was J. Michael Long. Now, at the time of this event, he was 12 years old, and he was outside playing when he noticed a large, slow-moving orange light in the sky. He said that as he watched it, he felt like he was frozen in time.
Oh, his was orange too.
Yeah,
How old was she again?
19.
Maybe it's only the younger people that can see the orange.
Oh, I like that theory.
I do too. We heard it right here.
We just cracked this one.
We did. That's what we do here on Nessie's Dead.
Yeah, alien color theory.
Yep.
But he actually learned a year later about the abduction. And interestingly enough, it had quite the effect on him. He ended up putting out a documentary down the road called Alien Contact, the Pascagoula UFO Encounter. And it actually features our very own alien abductee, Calvin.
Mm.
Yeah, fun
A little,
fact.
a little tell-all there?
I think so. Now, this was a little bit down the road when Calvin eventually starts talking about this experience, because remember, he does not
Yeah.
want to address it. But it did not take long for this story to hit the media or the town either. So literally the next day, Charles and Calvin go back to work. If this happened, I would not go to work. I
Oh,
would not
no.
pay taxes. I would not do any of the mundane. Nothing. I'd be like, I just got abducted by aliens. I'm doing whatever I
I know.
want.
Imagine calling in and telling your boss that, like, hey, I'm going to need like 2 weeks off. Last night I was out fishing and abducted by aliens.
Yeah. My throat's still sore from those elongated fingers.
Oh, God.
So everyone at work is asking them about what's going on. And of course, Charles is like, yeah, let me tell you all about it. This and this happened and this was crazy. Meanwhile, Calvin was trying not to talk to anybody about it. And at one point, he actually runs outside, drops down to his hands and knees, and starts throwing up because he was so freaked out about everything.
Oh, he's traumatized.
He was. I feel so bad for Calvin.
I think maybe he's one of those types of people that when something bad happens into their life or a tragic event, to cope with it, their logic is it didn't happen. If it didn't happen, if you just
Yeah.
don't think about it, it'll
Separate.
go away. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so. Now, also at this time, the town is being flooded with journalists who are trying to get in on the story. The Mississippi Press was actually the first news outlet to talk to them. Of course, Calvin was reluctant to talk about anything, and he actually said, I don't remember. All I remember was that I blacked out,
Oh,
which is
again.
interesting. So he is addressing it now. He's not saying, no, nothing happened, but he is saying, no, I don't remember, I don't remember anything. I have nothing to talk about. I was blacked out during the whole event.
I think at this point he can't really continue with the charade of nothing happened. Yeah, now the news people are getting involved. Everyone that they're encountering is like, "Oh my goodness, tell me about the aliens. What happened to you guys?"
Mm-hmm.
He can't run from the fact and keep saying nothing happened. So I guess a second resort that makes sense is I don't remember.
Yeah. He did also go on to say in that same interview with the Mississippi Press that he knows that these beings were not looking to cause him any harm, and that if he was to come in contact with them again, he could face them and communicate with them, which is very
Well,
interesting.
maybe he no longer has the fear of it.
I don't know.
I wonder if they're still communicating with him at this point telepathically.
Well, Charles claims that that is happening, actually.
That's what I was thinking because he's getting more comfortable with it and the fact that he claims he would be able to communicate with them. To me, it sounds like the communication may have not stopped.
Oh, maybe. Interestingly enough, though, Calvin was actually hospitalized twice due to extreme anxiety and stress from this event.
I can see that with poor Calvin. He's not taking this very well.
No, not at all. Whereas Charles actually writes a book about it called UFO Contact at Pascagoula. He also ends up becoming a pretty known figure in the UFO community, and he starts speaking at UFO conventions and on talk shows and whatnot. So he was really leaning into this little bit of limelight that he was getting with all of this.
He's being very vocal about it. But it makes it a little bit more believable that you've got one guy that's extremely vocal and then the other guy's literally losing his mind and pretty much silent about the issue. Because if you had both of them and they're both acting like Charles, it'd be kind of like, do they just want the fame and glory? Did these guys try to come up with something to make a little side money? I think Calvin's pretty much the best part of the evidence in this is the way he's reacting psychologically.
Yeah, I think that the fact that they both have very different approaches to this event adds a lot to the credibility.
Exactly.
Now, Charles did meet some skepticism, of course. I mean, both of the men did.
Oh, yeah.
Charles specifically because he was so vocal about it. And some believers are like, okay, we believe him, but he kind of seems to over embellish everything.
He's a little bit over the top with it.
Yes, and I do agree. I think that he kind of maybe unintentionally started adding a little more detail to all the stories, which is something, I get it. I think that can sometimes just happen when something crazy happens and you kind of start telling the story over and over,
Mm-hmm.
But Charles actually claimed to continue having alien encounters. He also continued seeing UFOs, having visitations and whatnot. He said that the aliens would telepathically warn him about nuclear weapons and environmental struggles on Earth, which is also a very common theme when people interact with aliens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This makes me think Calvin was definitely still hearing from him, especially if he was hospitalized twice. He was probably
he was
just like, make it
he
stop.
probably thought he was schizophrenic.
Yeah.
So Charles ends up passing away in 2011. That was around the time that Kelvin started to become more vocal about the situation. So it took from 1973 to the 2010s for Kelvin to really be like, you know what? I can't run from this forever. This happened to me. Here's my story.
How old is he now?
He was about 60.
Okay. So not too old to be having this like deathbed confession.
No.
Just more
maybe, it just took him some time.
Yeah. To adjust and be able to actually cope with and come to the actualization of this happened. Especially since he doesn't have Charles to keep the story living. Maybe he didn't want it to die.
Yeah, maybe. So Kelvin ends up teaming up with a UFO researcher, Philip Mantle, and Philip Mantle helps him write his book, Pascagoula, The Closest Encounter, which came out in 2018. At this time, he also began doing interviews and openly speaking about the event. He then actually has another encounter.
After he became more vocal about it?
I believe it was right before, and I think it was a part of why he decided to write the book, because he was like, okay, something else crazy is happening now. I need to get this story out there.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense to what would have triggered him to all of a sudden become more vocal. Ooh, and that's interesting. I wonder if after Charles passed, the aliens put a little bit more focus into communicating back with Calvin.
Maybe. I mean, I'll tell you the encounter he had, because he believes that they were after something. So this other weird encounter that Kelvin had took place in 1993. And right after it happened, he actually ended up getting hypnotized. He started looking into hypnotherapy. And it was through this hypnotherapy that he was able to fully understand what occurred in this encounter, which, of course, adds a level of skepticism to it, I think.
I don't know. I'm a big believer in hypnotherapy and being hypnotized and that bringing suppressed memories out.
Okay. I am too, but I can't help but think that he perhaps could have maybe somewhat of a false memory that he was mixing with the encounter that he did have in 1973.
Was there something specific about it? Did his story completely change or?
No.
Okay.
So he decided to go fishing in the same area that he was originally abducted in. This was in 1993. He arrived around 11 a.m. He has lunch, and then all of a sudden, it's dark. He also notices that there is a freshly caught fish in his cooler, and then he notices that his shirt is suddenly covered in blood. He has no idea what happened, how all of a sudden it got so dark. He has no idea where that fish came from. He has no memory of catching it or why his shirt is now covered in blood.
He just blacked out. He checked out a little bit there.
For a long time. And just kind of reappears in the same spot. It was all of a sudden he's just sitting and all of a sudden it's just dark.
The aliens bring him back up in the ship and they put him back. They're like, at least give him a fish, man.
Yeah. Give him a fish and some blood.
Yeah, at least give him a fish.
Yeah. So he tells a friend about this experience and that he's like, I have no idea what happened. I don't know why there was blood on my shirt. I don't know where the fish came from. I don't know how I lost so much time suddenly. The friend was like, I think you should try some hypnotherapy. He ends up getting hypnotized by a UFOologist, which I found very interesting. His name was Elliot Bud Hopkins. And while hypnotized, Kelvin was able to recall the event, but once it was done, he didn't remember it at all. Like, he was able to recall it during the hypnotherapy, and then it was gone. However, Elliot Bud Hopkins recorded the session and showed it back to Kelvin.
Did it help track his memory after he...
It did.
Okay.
So this encounter involved Kelvin being re-abducted on the same craft with the same beings. This time, though, the female creature that approaches him in the room, he said that she was more human-like. She did have the same thing with the long fingers that extended all crazy. And I guess she was trying to put her fingers back down his throat, but he fought her off. And they ended up getting into a bit of a brawl. This is where the blood on his shirt came from.
He killed it.
Well, he didn't actually kill it.
Oh, okay.
He said that I think he like hit her or something. Something happened and he did make her bleed. And he said that her blood was black, which bothered me a lot. But he was also injured, and I believe that the blood on the shirt was his.
Okay, I was going to say, how did it turn red?
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting that she seemed more human. I wonder if it was kind of like a shape-shifting or something to make him feel more comfortable. I mean, they have the information now.
Perhaps, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, some people in regards to this case believe that the reason for the abductions was that they're trying to take some kind of soul-like essence from the humans and put it into these robotic creatures.
Oh,
and
okay.
That they were creating these kind of hybrids. And that's why this time the female entity, alien, whatever, looked more human because she has had more of the...
she sucked more souls?
Yeah, she has had more of that experience of like becoming more human-esque, I guess.
Oh, okay. So like every time they abduct somebody, they take a little bit of that person's energy and being.
Yeah. And that's where some of the shape-shifting comes from. I don't know where I stand on that theory, but that is a theory in regards to this case and this specifically around this encounter. But Kelvin does believe that in 1973, with the initial abduction, they put some kind of tracking device in him and that they were retrieving it this time in 1993.
It reminds me of the movie that just came out, The Watchers, where the humanoid creatures that were in the woods were watching these people. They get trapped in this kind of cabin. I won't go too much into it, but they're watching them so that they can be able to mimic them and really feed. Yeah, skinwalkers, but they're watching them, and it kind of reminds me of that, of these aliens taking these people and scanning them and going through their memories and things, just collecting all that data so that they can use that to benefit themselves.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So also, while Kelvin was fighting this female alien during the second abduction, suddenly he said that a bright light appeared, causing both of them to stop what they were doing and just kind of stare at it. And he explained that the light was able to telepathically show him the past and the future, and that it was able to kind of control them and be like, hey, stop it. So I don't know what that's about. Maybe that's like a higher consciousness and it's coming to be like, hey, you're both my babies. Stop fighting. I don't know.
Well, if they felt that the ship was alive when they were in the ship.
Oh, uh-huh.
Maybe it was if the ship is alive, it was the ship being, I guess is what we'll call it, kind of coming in to break up the fight, kind of like a parent would or something.
Yeah.
Maybe the ship is
inside of me.
Yeah, maybe the ship is the one in control.
Yeah, that makes sense. And maybe it reaches out by extending a ball of light.
Kind of like a consciousness. Like, it's hard to explain.
It's not physical, so maybe the consciousness of it has to kind of form in a light.
Yeah.
To an extent.
my brain can think of like what I'm trying to say, but be able to put it into words, it's like, how do you explain this notion?
Well, I think it kind of goes beyond what we
We can,
understand on Earth.
yeah, our comprehension on it. Yeah.
So, with all that, let's go ahead and discuss some theories about what happened. Was it really aliens? Was it made up? Is it some kind of hallucination?
So you're going to discuss theories and then I'm going to say aliens the whole time?
You are.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
exactly what's going to happen.
Exactly.
So, the main skeptical theory is sleep paralysis.
No, I have
Yeah.
sleep paralysis and no,
You've never been abducted?
I've never gone on a journey. I've never left the couch or the bed that the paralysis happens at. Now, do I believe sometimes that I felt presence in the room and got some strange vibes that it was something that's probably not human? Yes. But I've never been teleported to a new place. That would be a very interesting sleep paralysis night indeed.
Yes. Well, and especially for two people to have the same sleep paralysis experience.
Yeah. I don't see that happening.
No. Now, I kind of like what you said. I believe that sometimes with sleep paralysis, these entities maybe use this particular state that the person is in to access them. Like sometimes I think sleep paralysis is literally just as simple as it is scientifically described. But again, I do believe sometimes entities can use that state of consciousness that we can get trapped in between wake and sleep.
Yeah.
I don't think that this is what that was.
No.
Now, the whole thing with it is that people say that Charles was the one experiencing the sleep paralysis, and that when he woke up, he really believed it happened. And him and Kelvin woke up at the same time while fishing, and Charles was like, "Oh my God, that was crazy." And Kelvin's like, "What are you talking about? Nothing happened." A lot of people think that's why Kelvin was like, "Nothing happened," and that Charles was just trying to convince him of this like crazy sleep paralysis.
I don't buy that at all.
I don't either, especially because aliens are not a very common sleep paralysis experience.
There's a reason they call it a sleep paralysis demon.
Yeah, it's usually like shadowy demon, like that hat figure. I've never had it, but I'm aware of stories.
I've had it more times than I can count, and I have so many stories. We should do it now. If we did a case on sleep paralysis, it would just be me yapping about my experiences the whole time. So yeah, no, I don't go with that theory at all.
No, I don't either. It's a lot of stretching, I think. But I do think it's interesting because Kelvin did say nothing happened, and he did tell that first paper that he spoke with that he initially passed out when everything started, and he was not aware as it was happening, but his story doesn't stay that way for long.
Yeah, I think it was his coping mechanisms.
Now, of course, we have the skeptic theory that they made it up for the fame and fortune, but what I will always argue is that when you claim to have been abducted, or you claim to have seen an alien or a Bigfoot or whatever, you do not get that much fame and fortune. You're not like the next Beyonce of the cryptid world. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you've got too many skeptics that are going to always be like, you're lying. And it's such a tight kind of community of people that will believe you.
Well, and how much money are you making off this book? Like anyone could put out a book, honestly. They're not rolling in the dough.
They probably would have made more money by making it a fictional story than this is a true story.
Yeah, and I think there are cases of people who come out with paranormal experiences and do it for the money, but I don't think that it ever really goes anywhere. There's one story I can think of specifically that I'm like, I think that was fake, and I think that it was to get a movie deal, and it worked.
Yeah, I think I know the one you're talking about. I believe it's a little bit probably easier I think it's easier within the paranormal world just because you do have more believers and it's more earthbound, and most everybody has some kind of curiosity into death and what goes beyond that. So it gives paranormal just a little bit more of a backbone rather than aliens. Bigfoot,
Yes, agree.
skinwalkers. I mean, that's a little bit more of a stretch to some people.
Yeah. So the other theory, and this is the one that I find the most interesting, and I really want to know what you think about it, is that they really were abducted, but not by aliens. They were abducted by the government disguised as aliens.
Nah.
No? Have you heard of that, like, theory?
No. Enlighten me.
So that is actually something that I think was like proven to happen at one point, that people, again, I think, but I'm pretty sure that there was something in Brazil where people got abducted by supposed aliens, and it was actually a secret government project. A lot of people believe that these alien abduction stories are never actually aliens, and that every time it's been some kind of government entity doing it as some kind of experiment or some kind of project for mind control. And it makes sense because of all the crazy stuff that the government is doing, like ours specifically,
Mm-hmm.
and all of the black projects that no one knows about. They could be trying to fake an alien invasion so that they could create a whole new world order situation and make it as if the aliens are the threat. That's what Project Bluebeam is all about.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could be for like military stuff, and they're practicing it out on civilians to see if this fake alien abduction will actually fly, and if they can do it to the opposing side's soldiers.
I could see that half and half. I could see that as being a possibility. I don't put it past the government for 1 second to pull some shenanigans like that. But I don't think that every single alien abduction and every single encounter with aliens would necessarily all be, it was just the government. But I do see how the government could take alien abductions and say, that's a really good idea. If we were to do this, we could get so much information. We could see how they react to an abduction. They see how much believability we can get out of them from this. How does the public react on this? I could see them using that to get data and things like that. And also, of course, do some research on some maybe weird kinky stuff they got going on at the government that they want to try out on somebody.
Yeah. It's also interesting because within that theory, you can get into the whole real alien stuff too, and how the governments are using reverse engineered alien spacecraft, and that they were actually able to create real energy bending spaceships that are real alien things that they're, you know what I mean? That they're using to stage everything.
I don't know if our government has quite that technologically advanced as that. I feel like we'd be seeing a lot more because if you think about the government, what's their main thing? War. War. They would definitely be utilizing that to their benefit. Yeah.
Well, I think we have some access to it, and we've had, some whistleblowers. There's one in particular that's like really prominent that I can't remember his name, but he was the reason we found out about Area 51, and it turned out to be true. And he also claimed another one called Station 4 that ended up being true.
I believe we have access to it. We have some limited.
Yeah, we just haven't quite figured out how to necessarily reverse engineer.
We probably just don't have the technology and the capabilities mentally.
No, I
probably
mean,
either.
They're so far ahead of us in so many crazy ways. And I think that on Earth, we're trying to look at it as technology. And I think it goes so far beyond technology. It's more of a quantum thing. So with that, you believe that they were full-on aliens abducting Charles and Calvin?
Yes. You already know.
Yes, I know.
Aliens. I believe them.
I know you do.
This one is a lot more, I would even say if I was a little bit more skeptical of a person, which I'm definitely not.
You're not.
No. But like I said before, with the two men reacting in completely different ways, that's just to me, that's very telling. They're both reacting to how they would respond to such an event that terrorized them, trauma. One wants to go and tell everybody about the trauma and this experience that they just went through the other one, complete opposite. He just wants it to go away and it never happened, or he doesn't remember until it gets to the point in his brain where he can no longer use that coping mechanism anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Aliens. 100%. I solved it.
Yeah. What do you
You're
guys
welcome.
think? Let us know. I want to know what you guys think about that.
Yes, definitely drop a comment.
Well, that's all I have on the Pascagoula UFO incident.
I loved it. I haven't heard this one, so
Oh, good.
That was good.
And you asked me, you were like, can you give me a hint? And my hint was
1970s. I was like, what? Bye.
something we have not talked about. Because I was going to say alien, but I was like, no. And we've covered aliens technically, but this is our first like
Abduction,
full-on alien-based story. Because Flatwoods, it was theorized to be an alien.
Mm-hmm.
And Lead Masks, it was like, okay, a death that involved summoning aliens. But this was the first one that was alien central and first abduction.
I loved it. We need to do more.
We do.
Yes. Well, with that being said, with the aliens, next week I am going to take us back to true crime. That seems to be my forte, and I'll go back to the crime world, but we definitely do need to go more into the great beyond. We need to get some more hauntings and things like that under our belt as well.
I was going to do a haunting for this one, but I was like, well, my other most recent one was a haunting. It was for Halloween. That was all haunting. So I was like, And then I also did haunted objects. I'm like, But I do have one that involves a hint of a haunting, and it's a true crime also.
Ooh.
So I think I'm going to work on that one. Otherwise, there's another one I just discovered, and I'm like, ooh, this is not talked about yet on our podcast. It'll be a new subtopic. It would be true crime, but it's a new form of it. And I'm like, ooh, this is what I've been looking for. So I think that's
interesting. Yes. So a lot of exciting things to come up this season. I'm very excited for it. Well,
yes.
You sounded like Long Legs when you did that.
Oh, I haven't seen it.
Oh, you haven't? Oh, you need to.
God, no.
Oh, I loved it. You know me, though. I like all the movies. Well, I guess with that being said, we're going to say
good night
and pleasant nightmares. Bye.
Bye-bye.